Bob Willis.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. I have a lot of confidence in Lisa. I really do. I have a lot of respect for her and the grief work that she does, and also for this church and the way it reaches out into the community, too. That's something that needs to continue, of course, and I believe it will. There's needs all around us. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to be sharing some things. I'm going to be playing in the clay in just a little bit and sculpting something, but I want to talk about grief a little bit tonight. You realize that. There, at the end of each one of those pews, there are a box of tissues. Those have never been used. So if you'd like to use those, you're welcome to do it tonight, okay? Because I may say something, or somebody might say something that triggers some feelings and emotions. That's quite all right. I do not worry about people who cry. I think it's very normal, okay? Shortest verse in the Bible says Jesus wept, okay? So I think it'd be all right if we do that occasionally too. But a little bit of a background. I spent 18 years as a Baptist minister. I'm a recovering Baptist preacher. Still in recovery, had to go to weekly meetings and such. But then I fell in love with grievers. I began to focus on grief and loss and people in my congregation and people in the community that had losses. And God just put a passion within me to deal with grievers. And then the Oklahoma City bombing took place, and God opened the door and said, "There you go, Bob." And so since that time, I've been doing grief work. Was with Integris Hospice as their grief counselor for 16 years, and retired probably 8 years ago to do more sculpting projects and grief conferences and things like that. I'm the sculptor at the Great Passion Play in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We just finished our third season there. We're excited about next year to kind of get all this stuff behind us so we can try to make a difference in lives for the cause of Christ. That's our purpose for being there. But my purpose for being here tonight is to provide some grief materials. You have plenty of materials. I promise I'm not going to read all those to you. I have been to meetings where they give you a piece of paper and then they read it to you, and you think, I could have read this at home. So I'm going to share some things that are not written on that piece of paper, but I will cover that information because I think it's very helpful. Leading up to that, though, and it's just some basics of grief. We actually grieve a loss of anything valuable to us. It does not have to be a death. It can be a change. We grieve change. If you've been through a divorce, been through a separation even, there's grief in that picture. If you have a child that maybe is having problems with drugs or alcohol, there's grief in that picture, okay? We feel a helplessness in that. So we grieve change, and some of the same things that we refer to as normal responses, you can reflect back and see, this is something that happens other than death. Absolutely it does. When I use that word normal responses, I want to touch on something with that real quick. I had a lady in one of my groups at Deaconess probably 20 years ago. They said, "Bob, the only thing normal in my life is a setting on my washing machine that says normal." I actually went home and looked at the dial on our washing machine. I dare you to do it. I looked at the words on that dial as related to grief. Normal is on that dial. So is heavy load. Because there's some days you can't even get out of bed. Your load is so heavy. Light load is on that dial. And then in those days you feel like you just ran in circles and didn't accomplish anything, that was your spin cycle. You can have one of those. You cry a lot, that's your rinse cycle. It's all on that dial of the washing machine. So on those days where you feel like you're overwhelmed, go look at that dial and see if you can relate to anything that's going on there. At the bottom right of our dial, it was said, pause and cool down. Some days we need to do that. You know what? You're doing that tonight. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Just to cool down a little bit, just to pause and be here tonight. I'm not going to ask you to say anything or do anything. I'm not going to call on you. So just relax, and hopefully the information tonight is something you can use when you walk out the door. That's my belief. That what we share tonight, you can use immediately. You do not have to wait 6 months or 6 weeks, but you can apply it today. We do grieve the loss of anything valuable to us, and we're going to have some people that will tell us what they think would be very helpful, but it also can be very hurtful. People, well-meaning people can say some pretty hurtful things, can't they? You should be over this by now is what struck me. After my dad died, somebody told me that about 6 months after his death. They said, you should be over this by now. I began to question what was wrong with me because I wasn't over it. I've read it, grief takes 6 months. I've read grief takes a year. I've actually read grief takes 2 to 3 years. But I have a different approach to that. I have a way to tell when you're over grief, 100% accurate. As you take your hand, you put it across your chest. If you feel a beat, you're not over it. As long as we've got a brain and a heartbeat, we will be grievers. Now, grief is on the inside, isn't it? And it's different for every person. You may be here part of a family unit tonight. Everyone feels that loss differently on the inside. We grieve according to our personality, and we grieve according to the relationship we had with the person who died. We grieve according to other losses we've had in our life. So everyone is different with the way it feels on the inside. That's personal and private. No one can see it. But when you talk about it, it becomes mourning. Grief is on the inside. Mourning is when it's expressed. A good definition of mourning is grief gone public. People can see it and hear it. But I'm reminded of a scripture Jesus used. He did not say, blessed are those who grieve. Remember, He said, blessed are those who mourn. They shall be comforted. So there must be a difference between holding it in and letting it out. It's a lot healthier if you let it out. On the inside, you see, everyone grieves, but not everyone mourns in healthy ways. Not everyone expresses it in healthy ways. I'm going to share with you a tool tonight that will be valuable if you want to allow your grief to become mourning. That is when people find healthy ways to express it, whether it's a loss in your life that has been recent or it's one that's been years ago. Because you see, grief doesn't go away. Have you noticed that? Grief doesn't go away. What happens in our life, and usually we can reflect back from about 3 years of age, we start remembering things. We may have losses in our life and we just stuff it and move on because that's what everyone tells us to do. Be tough, don't cry, stuff it and move on. Well, after a while, especially as an adult, we're stuffed. We've got so many losses that are unfinished, so much stuff going on that one more loss is about all we can handle. We might blow up at somebody and they're going to say, I wonder what's wrong with them. It seems so small. Well, it isn't just that thing, it accumulates. And our grief accumulates, and all it takes is one more thing, and boom, there we are. We're going to mourn, all right, and it might not be healthy for that person in front of us. But what I want to do is encourage you to have some healthy ways to mourn. Then I'll also talk a little bit about some grief in the holidays. I had a friend in Midwest City in a group that I was doing years ago. Her husband had died. She said, I would like to go to sleep the night before Thanksgiving and wake up the 2nd of January. Just sleep right on through all the holidays. Well, of course, that's what we like to do. We just don't have that privilege to do that. And then another lady I know that her husband had died. She had a friend whose husband died. They decided to take a cruise on Christmas. They took a week-long cruise for Christmas, and they came back, and she called me. She says, Bob, I was miserable halfway around the world. You know why? You take your memories with you. We cannot escape our memories, okay? We can't do that. So there's a word that I really don't like to use when I do any kind of grief work. I really don't like that word closure. Closure. To me, closure means I can put something in a room, close the door, not have to deal with it. I've got closure. Grief isn't that way. I might think I have closure on it, and I turn around, there's a memory right up in front of me. And that can disturb me because I thought I had closure. So instead of closure, I like to change that word just a little bit. I think it's healthy to get closer to it. Not closure, but get closer to it. Don't try to run for it. We can't run that far. We can't run that fast. The healthiest thing to do is to face our grief, put words to it so it can become mourning. I think that many have the idea that you can just kind of be tough and forget about it and it'll go away. Have you noticed that grief is a little different than a cold? You don't just get over it. We'll have those memories. The memories can come out of nowhere. And I really mean come out of nowhere. You can be driving down the road and have a memory hit you because there's a song on the radio. You wasn't prepared for that. I think that there's a reason for that. Let me share with you what the reason is. When a loved one dies, we lose them physically. You know, that's the part we lose. We lose someone physically. We never lose people emotionally. We never lose people spiritually. They're still part of us. Always will be part of us. But we lose a physical relationship. Of course, that's important. That's how we identify each other. That physical part's real important. That's the part we take care of the most, it seems like. But I want us to be reminded that there's things that trigger memories. There may be something said tonight that triggers a memory for you, and you might cry. It's all right, really. You're going to find that on that top page that you have, the normal responses to grief, at the bottom it talks about tears at unexpected times. You know where those unexpected times are, don't you? That could be in the grocery store. You can cry in the grocery store. You might not think so, but you will, because you look and there's the food you always bought for the person who died. And that's a connection. And you can cry. And that's okay. It's all right. I probably spend the majority of my time telling people it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to feel those things. It's okay to have those memories. I know that some people say we shouldn't cry. And I was serious. The shortest verse in the Bible says Jesus wept. It's the time after Lazarus' friend had died. And he saw the sisters of Lazarus hurting, and so he wept with them. Okay, so Jesus wept. So it's okay to cry. But we always like to try to guard those places and guard those times of when we cry. Find you a safe place. And maybe find a safe person who will let you cry around them. I met a young man in one of my grief groups. He was 17 years old. He had an 18-year-old friend who died. I learned from this young man because in the group I made the statement that I've probably made in every group. I said, we all need someone who will listen to us. Sounds about right, doesn't it? We all need someone who will listen to us. He said, that's right, Bob, but we also need someone who will hear us. I was driving home from that group. I was thinking about what he said. He taught me something. We listen with our ears. Sometimes it comes in one ear and goes out the other, but we listen with our ears, okay? But you hear someone with your H-E-A-R-T. You cannot spell the word heart until you spell the word hear first. So we actually need someone who will park in front of us and not lay their ears on us, but lay their heart on us. Let us be on the heart level with someone. That can be a rare person, okay? That's one I refer to as a safe person in your life. I hope you have a safe person in your life. That's someone you can call at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's your safe person. You know they're not going to chew you out. They're not going to tell you, that you need to be committed or anything like that, but they're going to listen to you and they'll hear what you have to say. That's a safe person. I hope you have one. If you don't have one, I'll give you my phone number and you can call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's fine. Not a problem. And I will listen to you and I will hear you. Then the next night I'll call you at 2 and we'll call it even. Okay? That's kind of how that works. Okay? But we need that person we have some history with that can be there present with us. That's a real important person. Now, I hope what I say now doesn't shock you. It might need to be someone outside your family. Because see, if you've had a loss in your life, pretty good chance other people in the family is hurting also. So it might need to be someone outside your family that is your safe person, someone you can talk to. And that person that you talk to is a real important person. And it may be, I'm just going to say, it may be someone like Lisa. I happen to know that she does hear people real well. But it may be someone that you can confide in, that you wouldn't tell anything to anyone else like that. It's okay. It's okay. What we do, we carry this grief stuff within us, and it will wear us out. from the inside. I was in a little class the other day, and they talking about stress. Y'all ever get stressed? Yeah. I only get stressed on days that end in Y. I've got narrowed down that. Okay. But as a griever, we can be stressed about a lot of things. We really can. You may be stressed about finances. You might be stressed about decisions that you have to make. You may be stressed because you're alone now. And your question is, what happens? What's next? What's going to happen in the future? Okay. So whatever it is that causes stress, I think we can identify sometimes that grief can cause stress. What I want to provide tonight are some tools. The first part of that is that sheet that says normal responses. And when you walk down that list, like I say, I'm not going to read it to you, but down that list it says things about your concentration is going to change. In fact, the fourth one down on that page says feelings of restlessness and difficulty concentrating. Can't sit still unless you're sleeping, okay? But we have a hard time concentrating. Now, in a group this size, probably at least half of you drove a car to get here tonight. Do you realize you can drive a car without a brain in the car? Have you done it yet? You can. I mean, you can go completely across Oklahoma City without a brain in the car. And there's a lot of people doing it, so you have to watch them, okay? There's a lot of people that's driving just what I've referred to as on automatic pilot. Because to be as close as you want to be to someone who dies, you do not have to go to a cemetery somewhere. You go to memories. And you can do that driving down the road. You can do that sitting in front of the television, and maybe the television's on and there's a movie on, and you do not remember a thing that they said. Maybe you turn the news on, you say, I'm going to see what the weather's going to be. Next thing you know, there's a movie on, you missed the weather, it came on. We zone out because to be as close as we want to be to someone who dies, we go to memories. And I do not discount that a bit. In fact, you're going to find I encourage that. I encourage going to memories because I want you to be close to the person that you lost physically, but emotionally they're still part of you. Because of that, we can talk about them. We can share stories about them. Okay? It's really important to share those stories. On that list of normal responses, it says your eating and sleeping patterns will change. Your eating and sleeping patterns will change. If you were the caregiver for someone who died, your eating patterns and your sleeping patterns had already changed. You think about that. You were on their schedule. You would sleep with one ear open, so to speak, listening for a noise and be up. So that good night's rest was absent. Okay? And then after a death, we have to try to find out what the new normal is. We may have a hard time finding that. We may have to go to a doc and get a little help us sleep. Or maybe our appetite's gone and we just don't have an appetite anymore. Maybe we don't feel like eating food. Food may not smell good. It may not taste good. And you have to force yourself to eat. The other extreme of that is to eat everything in sight. Okay? That could cause a problem. Going either way, not eating or eating too much can be. But think about it. You probably have a comfort food. Have you thought about that? What's your comfort food? Your comfort food is something that you go to. It's usually sweet or salty. And you can eat that all day long. Not even thinking about it, that's it. I happen to know that my comfort food is chips and salsa. I know that, okay? I confess that right here before you. I'm going through cardiac rehab right now, and they say, don't do the chips and salsa. I said, oh, so I need to go see another doctor now because they took that away from me. No, I know that there's a comfort food. In fact, you might think, well, you come to yourself and there's an empty bag of potato chips beside me, and you wonder who ate those, and you realize you ate those. You just did, the whole thing. Or maybe it's popcorn. Maybe it's chocolates, maybe it's ice cream. They make that in chocolate now. Something that we can just get to. In fact, one gentleman told me his favorite comfort food is anything you can microwave. He wanted it in a hurry. Okay? Whatever your comfort food is, be aware that we may have a tendency to overeat out of a nervousness, almost like a feeding frenzy we can get into. So our eating and sleeping patterns can be messed up. You know, doctors can give us some medication to help our appetite and even give us something to help us sleep better. But they cannot give a pill to help with grief. Relief from grief doesn't come in pill form. Doesn't. We may be depressed some. Doctors can give you something to help with that depression. It's not unusual. Okay, it's not unusual. Don't be embarrassed if you have to be on some medication for a while for depression. Don't be embarrassed. That's wisdom. Okay, it's wisdom that God gave something to help us stabilize our emotions so we can work on our grief. If you're on the roller coaster, it is hard to work on grief if you're on that emotional roller coaster. I've heard grief described as riding a roller coaster with a blindfold on. Can you imagine what that would be like? You couldn't tell when to hold on. You couldn't tell when to scream. You couldn't tell when it's going to ease up or drop off or turn. Couldn't see it coming. We're the same way. The next person who comes through that door and has a seat here beside you might look just like your loved one who died. You didn't see that coming. So emotionally, they're still part of us, so they can bring out the emotions. Give yourself permission to be normal. That's what I like for people to know. Give yourself permission. I think that a lot of people expect ourselves to be over it and operate just like we always did. In reality, we're grieving. We've had a wound of our heart. So we need to give that time to heal, don't we? It's more than 6 months, more than 2 or 3 years. It is a lifetime. It is a lifetime. When someone dies, they leave a hole in our world. Have you noticed that? There's a hole. There's a place where they were. Now they're not. So there's a hole in our world. Normal changed. Normal will never be normal again. There's a new normal, and it's okay if we don't like it because we did not choose it. Okay? It's one of those normals that's forced on us. Because of that, I like for family members to give other people in the family a little slack, a little patience, because it's something we all do as an individual, grieve. Some people are ready to talk, and some people are not. That's why it disturbs me a little bit when I hear somebody say, well, yeah, you know, Aunt Flo just pulled the car out from the front yard and said, everybody get in, we're going to the cemetery. Well, maybe not everyone is ready to go to the cemetery. Okay? So that really doesn't fit. It's got to be different for every person. Some people go to the cemetery every day. They really do. And we'll say, Bob, can't you fix them? No. I like to go sit with them. That's what I'd like to do. But I think when snow starts blowing, they might cut that visiting down just a little bit, spread it out. But it's okay to go. Some people go and take a sack lunch. That's okay too. But the key is, what do we do while we're there? It's okay to talk to them. You realize that? On that normal responses, it says something about mood changes. You folks ever have any mood changes? Yep, we do, don't we? The least little thing will trigger that too. We can have mood changes. We'll have the mood changes, and again, somebody's going to say, I wonder what's wrong with them. They were doing so well. Well, if we go around and everybody sees us with a big smiley face, and we hold a smiley face in front of everybody and they think we're doing well, we call these the Academy Award grievers. Because they get a smiley face after a loss, and everybody thinks, well, they're doing well because they're smiling. But somebody's going to catch us before we get the mask up someday, and they're going to say, wow, I wonder what happened. Well, what happened is we got to show our heart instead of holding up a mask. Reality is, grief hurts. Grief hurts. Mourning is the expression of that pain. putting words to it. And I think that's the value of it. On that list of normal responses, there's a line that says having guilt or regret over things that did or did not happen in the relationship. Both are normal, guilt or regret, but there's a difference in them. Let me share with you the difference in guilt and regret. Much like grief and mourning, they're very similar, we interchange them. But there's a difference in guilt and regret. I can have guilt if I make an intentional decision and I knew what the outcome would be. I might have guilt over that later. Remember the key word, intentional decision, and I knew what was going to happen. I might have guilt over that. Most of the time we're dealing with regrets. Regrets are, if I could go back, I would say some things different or I would do some things different. But we do not get to go back, do we? Guilt and regret are both very normal. And I'll share with you a little bit how to handle and deal with either one of those. You know, in my sculpture work, I do a lot of busts of people. And years ago, I did one. It was a bust I did intentionally because it was to start conversation with people who'd had losses. It was actually the bust of a man. He had a long, shaggy beard, a long mustache, long eyebrows hung over his eyes, long, shaggy hair, except from the ears back, he was slick bald. Everything back here bald. All the hair was up front. That was the face of opportunity. Because when opportunity comes to you, you got to grab it right up front. Because once it gets by, there's nothing to grab. We usually recognize opportunities when we miss them. You may think about relationships that you've had with someone who died and you realize, I missed so many opportunities. You missed them. Well, you can't go back and grab it, can you? We learn from those. Those are hard lessons, but we learn from those missed opportunities. And hopefully when we learn from those missed opportunities, we put into place something to help us in relationships with others. What I'll share with you tonight, you can actually use with people who are still alive. Do you realize that there are people still alive who can cause you grief? You know that? You all need some names and numbers, or do you have your own? You got your own? There are actually people who are alive that can say some hurtful things. They can cause us grief. They can hurt our heart. What do we do with those people? Well, it's different if they're family because we can't necessarily stay away from them, but there's a tool I want to share with you, and it isn't written down anywhere, but it's a real simple tool. What do you do with this? Remember the first time you met them, the early memories. Go back to an early memory of that person. Got it? The early memories. Now, go back to a memory that feels good. When you remember their life and their relationship with you, think about something that feels good when you remember. Maybe they're not kin to you and that feels good. Okay, that's all right. And then think about things that hurt. That's a relationship. Starting point, things that feel good and things that hurt. That's a relationship. Most of the time, relationships have far more things that feel good. Often the things that hurt are at the end of a relationship, especially if you saw the person suffering. That hurt. If you saw them helpless and you were helpless too, that hurt. So in relationships, we have a starting point, things that feel good, and things that hurt. The reason I say that can be helpful when you deal with someone who's hurt you and still alive, it helps put it into a perspective. They're not all bad. There may be something good in there that you can find. Look for that. It doesn't mean that you have to be with them all the time. It just helps you to deal with your feelings, your emotions. Now, if I have one visit with someone, I give them a tool. I give you a tool. Before I do that, I think I need to share this with you. I played with a little bit of clay here tonight. A number of years ago, probably 15 years ago now, I had a gallery down in Canton, Texas, a place called the First Monday Trade Days. I would sculpt people all day and visit with people. And there was a family that came in, a 3-generational family, filled up my gallery. The older lady approached me and she says, "Can you do a sculpture from a photograph?" And I said, I can if I have good photographs. So she began to lay photos on the table of this little boy. And I looked at the photos and I said, can you give me a profile shot up close so I can get the shape of the nose and the chin? Everybody started crying. Everyone left the room, except that lady, my wife, myself. She said, this is our grandson, 3.5 years old. He drowned 2 weeks ago in our backyard. Last month he was with us here in your gallery. So at his funeral, my husband said, let's go back and see if that guy in Canton can sculpt Malachi. So I did a bust of Malachi from the photos, and while I was doing that, this is what God showed to me. That family came into the gallery. They brought their heart in the door, just like you did tonight. These stitches are past losses in life. We all have them. We all have past losses in life. They kind of leave a scar. And you know what I found out about scars? If you pick on it and scratch on it long enough, it's going to come up and hurt you again. Okay? If you bump it just right, you remember how you got it. That can happen with past losses. Malachi's death had broken their heart. Absolutely broke their heart. Granddad was going to burn trash. He dug a hole to burn trash. It rained. That's where they found Malachi. I could not even talk to Granddad. He would not talk to me. He was carrying guilt. And we know after tonight, it was more regrets. He didn't do that intentionally. But he regretted not filling in that hole. Malachi's death had broken their heart. You're here tonight because you have a broken heart. But then I heard him say, if it had not been for our neighbors, we would have fallen apart. If it had not been for our church family, we would have fallen apart. So I put a bandage across that break. In my years with working with hospice nurses, I heard them tell me that bandages do not heal. They just hold you together while God's doing the healing. Do you realize that? Psalm 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted. He binds up their wounds. He does that. Do you know how we've made it this far in life? We've all had bandages. We've all had bandages. These are the people that you can call it to in the morning. These are the people you can count on. These are people going to be there to kind of help hold you together while God's doing the healing. But I also am just aware that many of you are a bandage for someone else who has a broken heart. You'll be there if they call. You'll listen to their stories. That's your bandage. That's a precious person. I'm serious. That's a precious person. That safe person, you don't just run down to the corner and pick one of those up. That's been built on trust and experience, and all of a sudden there's a safe person there. That's your bandage. So the healing heart sculpture is something that's been around probably 15 years as a reminder that when our heart's broken, we need people to support us while God's doing the healing. If my role tonight is to be any support, what I share with you next would be the best support I can give to you. It's the second page that you have on the handout sheet. The second page that you have, in fact, it's probably entitled Writing to Soften the Pain, because that's what I like to encourage people to do. Yep, writing to soften the pain. The way I come across this, I like to encourage people, if you could have one more conversation with the person who died, not your last one, if you had another one with that person who died. It wouldn't bother me if you talked to them every day. Serious, it wouldn't. Because emotionally, they're still part of you. I've had people ask me, can my loved one see me from heaven? And yet, you might question that same thing. This is Bob's opinion, okay? I say yes, because the 11th chapter of Hebrews in the Bible is referred to as the Faith Hall of Fame. List out great people in the Bible, great people of faith. And then the 12th chapter of Hebrews, it starts out, seeing we're compassed about or circled about by this great cloud of witnesses. Let's run this race that's set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. I believe my dad can see everything I do, but he is in a place where I cannot break his heart. He's in a place where he cannot have a tear. If he can have a tear and I can break his heart, He's not in heaven, okay? But what I see is that loved ones in heaven get a picture of eternity. And what we experience here in these less than 100 years, this little blip on the radar screen, they see what life is all about. We're just passing through here. So I wanted to share that because I sense that maybe somebody might have that question. It's quite common for people to ask me that question, can they see us in heaven? I just gave you Bob's viewpoint, okay? You can take it or leave it, but I believe the Scriptures, Hebrews chapter 11, Hebrews chapter 12, speaks to that. It's a way for us to realize that we have witnesses and we are in a race, running this race. Well, what if you could talk to this person who died? Let me give you a guide, and that's what this is. That page that's writing to soften the pain, I encourage people to take maybe a notebook and a pencil and sit down in a quiet place that maybe you can shed tears if you need to. You can get angry if you need to, and nobody's going to jump on you. And you think about each one of these steps as it walks down through here. The very first one is, what would you thank them for? If you could talk with them right now, what would you thank them for? You know, that's a sentence completion thing. You might write out and finish a sentence. And there's another sentence and another one. You may have a paragraph. You may have pages of what you would thank them for if you could talk with them again. Because it may be something you never mentioned to them. It's what you would thank them for. What would you apologize to them for if you could talk with them again? That's usually something they would carry within us. And it's eating on us because we always thought we would talk about it and we didn't. Now there's a place to do it. What would you apologize to them for? What's your fond memories that you have with them? Write those down. It may take several pages, huh? It may take several pages. And it's okay. This is what I refer to. In fact, when I do a group of 6 weeks, this is usually session number 4. And I tell people, this is the kind of homework that you can't copy. You give one of these pages to every person in the family, they all have different answers, don't they? They all have different things they would thank them for, they would apologize for, they have different memories. You see, the next one says, what would you forgive them for? What would you forgive them for if you could talk with them again? You know, I know what forgiveness is in the spiritual realm of life. In grief work, I have a different definition. To me, forgiveness is giving up the hope of a different yesterday. I'm going to run that by you one more time. Giving up the hope of a different yesterday. Whether it's been 24 hours ago or 24 years ago, it's never going to be any different than what happened. We can't change it. We can sure mess up today trying, but we can't change what happened in the past. Forgiveness is not saying who's right and who's wrong. It's saying, I can't carry this with me. It's too big of a burden. I don't have time or energy to carry this. So it's forgiveness. And then, what feels good? If you was to talk with them, write these things down, what feels good when you think about them? Those are those things that you look back over the relationship and you say, I'm so glad that happened. I am so glad that happened. That's the things that feel good. The things that hurt are the ones you look back and say, I wish that had never happened. See the difference? Things that feel good and things that hurt, but they're both normal in relationships. Of course, it says if you feel guilty about something. And then there's something you always wanted to tell them. Have you noticed this? It may sound so simple, but relationships end before we're through with them. Relationships end before we're through with them. I think it's Diamond Rio that had a song many years ago, One More Day. One More Day. Powerful song. Powerful word. And what they were saying, relationships can end before you're through with them. I wish I had one more day. You might think that with your loved one. This is your one more day. To be able to walk down that little list, something you always wanted to tell them. Then there's the one that says, I wish I had. Those are the regrets. I wish I had. Or maybe say, I wish I had not. But you're looking back and thinking about the relationship. You know, this eats on me, it doesn't feel right. Now, You may be surprised to see the third from the bottom, but it says, I would like to have heard you say. You see, grief isn't always what we say or what we do. Sometimes we grieve what we haven't heard. Let me give you a for instance on that. Back in 1990, I was leaned up against the wall of the ICU at that time Presbyterian Hospital. My dad had just died of a heart attack instantly. I was waiting on family. And while I was waiting on family, I was thinking about my relationship with my dad, and I realized I never heard him say, I love you. I never heard him say, I love you. He provided for his family, took care of a wife and 5 kids, took care of us well, worked sometimes 2 jobs. He provided for us, but I never heard, I love you. If I'd had another moment with my dad, I really do think I would have told him, Dad, I need to hear that. I love you, and I need to hear that from you. As I look back of his family dynamics and the family of origin that he grew up in, I realized he probably never heard it either. So my wife and I have intentionally made that change with our kids and grandkids. They get tired of hearing it. It's okay. We decided to go that route. Okay, but sometimes we grieve what we haven't heard. That's where you would put it. Of course, the last one there is I want you to know. That's kind of a catch-all if it doesn't fit anywhere else on that list. If you could talk to your loved one, what would you want them to know? You may have 1 word and you may have 3 pages of what you would want them to know. Now let me tell you real simple how this works. This list, this is worthless until it's applied. Then it has value. Does it make sense? It's worthless. It's just words on a piece of paper. Until you apply it, then you will see the value. And you'll do it as an individual, not as a family, but as an individual, because everybody's going to have different feelings and different relationships. But what I have found is that every piece of what we call unfinished business will fall in one of these categories. Unfinished business in our grief will fall in one of these categories, so we could write it down. When we are writing that word down, our grief is becoming mourning. Remember, grief's on the inside, put it out on paper, sharing it with people, it's an expression. So our grief becomes mourning. Probably the question I get the most from people in grief groups, when will I feel better? Everybody wants to know that. When will I feel better? So I've come up with an answer. When grief becomes mourning. Matthew 5:4, Jesus said, Blessed are those who mourn, they shall be comforted. Didn't say blessed those who grieve. Blessed those who mourn, they shall be comforted. So when will I feel better? When your grief becomes mourning. When you put words to your grief. This is a tool to put words to your grief. You may finish that in 15 minutes. You might work on it for a year. Some people use this as a little journaling tool. Be able to get up and they have a thought and a memory. They'll write some things down. That's a very healthy thing to do. The only other option is to hold it in. Remember, grief, we'll have 2 options. Hold it in or let it out. A lot healthier to let it out. So we're able to let it out by writing it. And you can keep it secret. You can keep it like what do you call those things? Diaries? My sisters used to have diaries that they thought were private. Y'all know how that works. This can be your diary. This can be your private writing. This could be something that's a letter that you're writing to your loved one. Here in just a moment, we're going to look at coping with the holidays. I'll just go ahead and spring into it, okay? What I encourage people to do, get a tree, dedicate to your loved one. Doesn't matter if it's 1.5 feet tall or whether it's 8 feet tall. You dedicate it to your loved one. You can purchase ornaments that remind you of your loved one and put on that tree. It's a remembrance tree. That's what you're going to do. You're going to remember your loved one with that tree. So shop around, look around, find ornaments to hang on that tree. My mother-in-law was an Elvis addict. If Elvis had it, she had it too. When she died, that collection went to her oldest daughter. I happen to be married to that lady. Guess who is hanging on our Christmas tree? Do you know they make Elvis ornaments that you can get year-round? Everywhere. But we remember her mother by putting Elvis ornaments on the tree. Remember her dad by putting cowboy boots on the tree because that's what he was. Do something to honor your loved one on a remembrance tree. You can do that. How do you cope with the holidays? Don't try to avoid bringing them in. Invite your loved ones to Christmas. Invite them to Thanksgiving too. Invite them to the holidays. Invite their memories, but look for a way to honor them. Yes, you can get those ornaments, and you can put a photo of them on a table, and you can do that at Thanksgiving even. Put a photo on the table with a candle next to that, and just light that candle to start the day. You know, this may sound rather strange to you. I encourage people to light that candle next to that picture and pause for 1 minute. 1 minute. Pause and think about them for 1 minute. You're honoring them. You're making them part of the holidays instead of trying to ignore it. I like to think that when I die, my family might do that, and maybe, just maybe, I might be worth a minute on a holiday. Don't our loved ones deserve that too? Where we call time out in these traditions to spend just some time to think about them. You can't ignore them. You can't pretend that it isn't going to happen. So invite them into the holiday celebrations, if you would. You may buy gifts to give to other people because that's what your loved one would have done. Think about that. Maybe you volunteer at a soup kitchen or a church function or someplace that's giving toys for kids. You volunteer because you need to be around some smiles in the holidays. You can do that. My dad died in the month of October. Someone planned Thanksgiving in November. We was at my parents' home, sitting around the table. At the head of the table was an empty chair. Do you know whose chair that was? That's right, that was Dad's chair. It was still there, and it was empty. No one said a word about it, and it hurt to see the empty chair because we knew who was supposed to be there. And there was like a cloud hanging over Thanksgiving that year. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, when we gathered there again, the empty chair was taken out. There was a high chair there, and the youngest grandchild was put in the high chair. Suddenly that picture of death at the end of the table was life with food going everywhere down at the end of the table. You know you can actually move chairs away from the table? You really can. I would encourage you to make those kind of changes if you need to. It's okay. It's okay to make those changes because your loved one, their presence is going to be there. So I encourage people to invite them in, talk about them. On that tree that I said that you could hang, you could put ornaments on there. What if you did this? You could do it at Thanksgiving, you could do it at Christmas. You have some note cards and a pencil there on the table, and you ask family members to write a memory of their loved one that's hanging on the tree. It's a remembrance tree. Maybe all you could do is write one word of what they put into your life and hang it on a tree. It makes them part of it. The tool I just provided for you about writing to soften the pain, you can actually outline that and have people just write things they would thank them for. And at Thanksgiving, you can have a Thanksgiving tree of what you would thank that person for, the one that died. You can do that. Maybe you can share the memories also and put them on there. The positive things that you could write, make them part of it. The holidays will hurt. You cannot avoid them. You can't just speed past them. You can't sleep your way through them. So what I encourage people to do is take the initiative. Take the initiative. Say, this is what I'm going to do. You can gather your family together if you want to and say, tell you what's going to help us. Heard this old bald-headed guy at the church the other night talking about this, so let's try this. Let's write on cards special memories we have of Grandpa, Grandma, Mom, Dad, brother, sister, whoever. Let's write them on a card and hang it on a tree. Hang them on a tree because we remember them. I had a young lady in one of my groups many years ago that said for Thanksgiving what they did was put a white sheet out on a table and gave everyone some felt tip markers and had everyone to take that portion of that tablecloth and write what they were thankful for on that tablecloth and date it. Put their name on it and date it. After that Thanksgiving was over, they folded that one up and put it away. Did the same thing the next Thanksgiving. Put that one away. You know what's going to happen? Just maybe a year or 2 or 5 years down the road, you realize there's somebody's handwriting going to be on that. You'll be able to pull that one out and realize that somebody that's no longer with us physically, they wrote on that. It becomes a treasure. Okay? You can't go to Walmart and buy that one. It's treasure. It's personalized. So look for ways to personalize the holidays. Include them. Include them. And it may be having photos of them around the house. That'd be all right. Decorate with the photos. That's okay. Talk about them. Maybe decide this Thanksgiving meal, what you're going to do is eat their favorite food. My father-in-law always said every Thanksgiving and Christmas, he was notorious for saying, well, next year we're going to McDonald's. Well, we never did. Okay. But you know, when he died, his 4 granddaughters left the hospital, went to the home, and fixed his 4 favorite foods. So when the family came, they were eating foods that he loved. It connected us to him immediately. You can do that. What I encourage you to do, think about our time together here this evening. I gave you a piece of paper that talked about normal responses. I believe everyone here is normal. I really do. We're normal as a griever. We're doing things that might make us feel abnormal because we're not taught how to grieve. We're not taught to mourn. So we're questioning, am I doing the right thing? Be honest and true to your heart. Honor your loved one. That's how you grieve. Honor your loved one. So the normal responses to grief is not a checklist. You don't have to get all those and say, boy, I'm normal now. Don't be surprised if you can see yourself in a few of those. That's all right. But you don't have to get the complete list. But then that writing to exercise the feelings and express them, that's the tool. If I only talk with someone one time, that's what I want to give to them, is a way to turn your grief into mourning so we can express it. You can use that same tool with someone who is still alive. Occasionally I work with people who've gone through a divorce. They're grieving the loss, not only of their spouse, but maybe their family connections and their role in the family, and the role in the community, role in everywhere. Everything changed. Maybe they had to move. So many losses, there's grief all over that. So I give them that page and say, write them a letter. Write your spouse a letter. And then let them read it. It puts words to the grief. Now, I do not know, I have not spoken to anyone here tonight, but there may be someone here tonight that's angry at God. That's okay. God can handle it, okay? God can handle it. If you're angry at God, maybe He let you down. I use those words. I remembered a guy who was about this tall. He was just an acquaintance of a friend of mine, so I went to the hospital. His wife was having cancer surgery. We had prayer before the surgery. The doctor came out after surgery and was telling him couldn't get it all. She's terminal. The doctor walked away. That guy turned to me, I guess because I represented God to him, took me by the shirt and said, God let me down. I didn't have anything to say. I didn't say, well, have you ever let him down? I didn't do that. He had a hold of me. But I realized he was grieving. That's what he was doing. He was expressing it. He was good at expressing himself. But if you're angry at God, write him a letter. I'm serious. Write God a letter as if you could never talk to him again. What would you thank God for? Write it down. Those are called blessings in life. What would you apologize to God for? We call that confessing sins. What would you want God to know if you could talk to him right now? What would you like to hear from God? You write those feelings down, your grief is becoming mourning. Okay? That's the key. Put words to your grief. I want you to walk out with an image tonight. That image is this heart, the healing heart. All of you brought one in. We've had these past losses. Our heart's broken because of a loss, but there's a bandage. This is a person to keep you from falling apart. I know that you already have one of these because you're here. You're here. You're not folded away somewhere. You've got a bandage. Maybe we don't reach out to them. They can't fix us. A bandage doesn't fix a broken heart, but it keeps it held together. Lean on that bandage, okay? Lean on the bandage while God's doing the healing. I want to thank you for coming. One thing I was telling Lisa, I appreciate so much you being here, each one of you, and hopefully there's something valuable you can take with you. You're welcome to follow me on Facebook each morning about 7 o'clock. I'll put something called Mourning Moments on Facebook. It's just a little deal about grief and life. So you can follow a guy named Bob Willis. Now that's follow me, don't stalk me. There's a difference, okay? I know the difference. But you're welcome to follow me. And I'm not trying to push anything there. I may offer some things occasionally like hearts or books, but it doesn't cost you a penny to follow me. And maybe some things that be helpful for you and you can share with someone else too. And that's why I encourage you to do it. I believe we're in this life for a reason. And that's to receive some help and pass it on. Okay, receive it and pass it on. I believe that's why we are here. The things that we experience in our grief, maybe things that give us comfort, might be able to give someone else comfort if they know about it. So that's what we do. We share it on that Facebook page. We share things that help us, and people can find some good help in it. So I want to thank you for coming. I would like to have prayer if I could. Would it be all right if you had prayer? I'd like to, because I know the one who heals the brokenhearted. Father, just thank you for loving us, even when we're unlovely. Thank you for every person that's here. Father, you know all about the losses and the hurt, the pain, the grief, the emptiness. I pray you might provide that person that could be that safe heart person for them. And Lord, as you're bringing about the healing for them, moment by moment, that you would have patience with us, Lord. Let us see your love. Let us see your guidance. Lord, thank you that you'll listen to our questions. You'll listen to our anger because you know our hearts. Thank you for Britain Christian Church. I pray you continue to use it as a lighthouse in this community. For loving us the way you do, we praise you in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Be sure you take a handout with you. Okay, that was intentionally giving you a handout. Here comes Miss Lisa. Come up here, girl. I appreciate the opportunity just to be here that you've extended.
I just want to say thank you to everybody that came here. I know it cost you something to be here. People don't normally just show up on a Tuesday to hang out with people who are grieving. Yeah. You paid a high price to be here, and the prerequisite to get here is acknowledged. And I really appreciate you taking the time. Some of y'all came a long ways, and I just want you to know I appreciate it. I do know most of you, but if I don't know you, please don't leave without me being able to introduce myself to you. I do the grief ministry here, and I just want to say, too, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Your words are always so comforting and encouraging, and I love your tools. I steal them, so if you ever come to my class, it sounds a lot like his.
So the same training.
It's true. One of the things we do at Britain Christian Church, and I took this from him last year when he came, it was just such an inspirational thing. And Harriet, if you would stand up. She's a great friend of mine, and she has been a helper here to me in the grief ministry for a long, long time. And we came up with, just after listening to him, having it's called the Father's Tree, and we have it here during the Christmas season. And it's for everybody in our church. If they've lost somebody, they bring an ornament or they bring a picture, and they write the name on it, and we set it out in the foyer. And it's just a great thing, just something we can do to remember. We know those people are going to be on our minds, so it just helps everybody when they come in to be able to have that and kind of look at it and decorate it. And everybody knows when they come to that tree that it's a somber time, but it's a great memory time. Mm-hmm. And people see pictures of past memories here that maybe they hadn't thought about for years. I'm like, oh, I remember these stories. So it ends up being a great place just to have coffee and people talking about memories of our loved ones. So if you don't go to church here, you might think about doing something like that at your church, implementing it. It's amazing if you just set it out there and you let people know how it just kind of takes on a life of its own. Because we do know where our loved ones are, and they are in the Father's house. Mm-hmm. And we just thought that was a really neat idea, and we took that from you. So
mourning around that tree, isn't it? That's
there
great.
is.
Very healthy.
There is. And one of the things Harriet had done that was a great kind of inspiration too, she made a photo album. When Harriet's husband passed away, she was having a discussion one time about how sad is it that our grandkids aren't going to get to know Tom. Mm. And then she thought for a minute. She goes, you know what? But it's my responsibility to make sure they do know him. So she made a photo album, and it had just a lot of memories and different things in there. And the other thing that does, that there's a healing that comes from going through those old photographs. And I would encourage you to, along the lines of what Bob was saying at Thanksgiving or Christmas, get out the old photographs, the old photo albums, and set them around. And that gives everybody in the family an opportunity to talk about that person. They know it's a safe place to talk about when they see that open. And
you have laughter and tears then also. Look at those photographs. You'll have laughter and tears. That's what life is about, laughter and tears.
Absolutely. So, and he mentioned something about traditions, doing things a little differently, alter rather than abandon. I know it's easy to want to, like he said, go to sleep after around mid-October and wake up on New Year's Day and be like, the holidays are over. But try to find a way that suits you and your family. And maybe that's just taking a picture and, like he said, decorating it and lighting a candle and taking a moment just to reflect on that. So there's a lot of great points, Bob. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. So that really concludes our evening. I appreciate everybody taking the time to be here. And please don't leave. If you don't know me and I don't have your contact information, please don't leave without giving that to me so I can send you guys notices of other classes and things that we may have coming up. And like I said, you can look at his Facebook page. Britain Christian Church has a Facebook page. I have a Facebook page. It's called Lisa Listens. And you can get on that, and every time we have things coming up, we'll make sure that you're included and give you the opportunity to come or invite somebody that may be hurting. Thank you very much.